I talked about wanting to have a more painterly style to my art. I've always wanted to have more of a textured and loose look to my art pieces, but the end result whenever I try to do a painterly style often looks muddy and unrefined. Like this Even and Dunhang fan art I'm showing you guys right now. I tried a more painterly approach with the Jinshi fan art I did before, but it wasn't loose enough because I already had the line art set before I started painting. The textures weren't texturing is what I'm trying to say here. It's too close to my usual art process and my usual habits just showed itself. And while I did like the end result of the fan art, I needed it to be more loose and for the line art to not dictate the whole shape of the artwork. That's why I'm doing studies for the next couple artworks instead. I downloaded some textured brushes a while ago on the Clip Studio Asset store, but I never really used them because my previous art style was more of a clean line art with some cel shading to it. Why did I have that art style if I don't like it as much, you ask? Well, that's because I was obsessed with animation during that time, and I was making some small animations here and there. And if I wanted to keep things consistent with the light and shadows, I had to use cel shading. But anyway, I learned a lot of things with Clip Studio Paint when I was making animations, and it was a lot of fun while it lasted. But at the end of the day, I got bored of it and I went back to illustrating instead. I will do some random animations here and there, but usually it's very simple works. You know what, after this I might actually start doing some animations again with like the painterly style. I think that would be super cool. I actually really love like chaotic animations. Okay, wait. Okay, back to the script. So now here we are with me trying to have a more painterly art style. There are some artists I talked about last week that inspire me a lot. One of them is RDJLock. They're the artists that I'm gonna be studying today, and they are my absolute favorite artists. Back in 2022, I studied RDJLock's painting style by recreating their Snow White art piece. But I wasn't able to implement it into my art pieces because I didn't learn anything from it aside from copying the colors. I was able to copy it somewhat nicely, but that didn't mean I understood why certain parts had certain colors. That was why when I tried to implement the same technique into an original artwork, I wasn't able to do it well. I didn't know until now that the reason certain areas of the Snow White piece has yellows, reds, and blues in it was because of light diffusion. If you don't know what light diffusion is or subsurface scattering, it's basically when light hits a certain object and the color of that object bounces off it and it casts extra colors on other objects. Anyway, RDJLock has some time lapses they post now and again, and I used to watch them in a loop to try and learn their art process. My conclusion in the end was that the lasso tool was going to be my best friend because it's an important part of their coloring technique. Back then, I wasn't really much of a fan of the lasso tool, but perhaps it was because I was using Procreate and using the lasso tool there was kinda weird. Now I'm using Clip Studio Paint and I use the lasso tool a lot more in my art process. It's just a lot faster to color large blocks with. Looking back, I now realize that copying an art piece in hopes of somehow being able to paint like them one day isn't going to help me in the long run if I try to copy their process without trying to understand why they did certain things. RDJLock's art style has changed since then. It was such a gradual process that I didn't realize that their coloring technique changed until I started looking at their older pieces. For this video, I'm going to study a more recent artwork and absorb the art technique into my own art style. So let's level up with this art study. Okay, so the first thing I did was to draw this artwork in my current art style while trying to make it look painterly. It's important that I do this right now because it will become a point of reference for me later on because I will be redrawing this after the study. Second is choosing an artwork from RDJLock's Twitter account to copy. I chose this because it has that looseness to it that I really like, and I can learn how to draw flowers too. RDJLock doesn't seem to be using a lot of textured brushes for this artwork, so that's pretty lucky for me. Now we start with redrawing this artwork. I didn't want to color pick from the original drawing, so I just decided to eyeball it. Remember, the goal in this study is to learn a couple techniques, not to draw exactly like them. I admire RDJLock, but I know I can never be as good as them. But I do know is that I can be the best of me, which is why I'm doing this art study right now. I want to improve my art skills. Anyway, let's start with explaining how they color the hair. Honestly, it seems to be pretty simple. They follow along the gravity to show the movement in the hair, and then they add details with a really thin brush. They do a lot of strokes on the bangs to give it more texture. The way they rendered cloth, I don't fully understand, especially why they have that huge orange area on the arm. I don't think it's supposed to be the skin because it doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to assume it's just a stylistic choice. What do you guys think? I've watched a time-lapse of RDJLock drawing one of their flowers before, and I think it's a pretty interesting way of drawing them since they usually start with a blob and then go into detail for each petal. They also don't draw all the flowers on their art pieces one by one. Instead, they will draw a couple flowers and use those to populate the art piece. Work smarter, not harder, after all. The flowers on the fan are very simplified, and I tried doing something similar. The flowers at the front are the same flowers on her hairpiece that I just reused because I didn't feel like drawing flowers that I will just blur like hell in the end. Afterwards comes the fun part, which is figuring out the lighting with layer effects. I tried doing it with my usual technique of adding a layer on hard light mode and using the add glow layer for the lighting. I really love using this technique. It's something I learned when I was in my animation phase. What I observed from a lot of RDJLock's paintings is that they use their lighting sparingly. We both use a lot of blur in our artwork, but something that RDJLock does that I don't is add chromatic aberration to their piece. I tried to add them on this one too, but I didn't have the correct colors because in the art piece they were using magenta and yellow for the effect, and it was 5 AM while I was drawing this and my brain is tired. I watched a YouTube tutorial the next day to fix a chromatic aberration into the right color, but I forgot to record it. But here's the final result of the artwork. The hair ended up more brown instead of a grayish hair color, and I didn't add any details on her hanfu. And I think I might have delved too much into the pinks. It's not perfect, but I definitely learned a couple things in the study, so I'm taking this as a win. Next is getting the art study I did earlier and using what I learned from studying RDJLock to redraw her. I didn't try to redraw the exact same art piece as you guys can see on this. I've only recently started drawing artworks in a small thumbnail at first because it's a lot easier for me because if I do it like at full canvas, the brushes will lag. The thing is, my canvas size is usually around 5,000 to 9,000 pixels, so the largest brush on Clip Studio Paint, which is 2,000 pixel, it isn't large enough. But if I paint it like this, it's a lot easier for me to shift stuff around before I start rendering. After I put in the shading, I enlarged the thumbnail to fit the canvas. Then I started rendering the piece. I don't really have much to explain during this process since it's practically the same as the RDJLock drawing, except that I used a watercolor brush that I downloaded in the Clip Studio Asset Store instead of the basic round brush. I kind of forgot I was supposed to use the round brush because I was having so much fun with the watercolor brush that when I zoomed out, the dress was already rendered and I really liked how it turned out, so I kept it as it is. I'm going to speed up and do some jump cuts during this process because I doubt you guys would like to watch a 2-hour long video of me rendering this art piece. Now, the video is coming to an end. Honestly, I'm extremely surprised by the end result of the artwork. I really like it a lot. I did some final edits off camera where I took off the highlight on her cheek and adjusted the lighting a little bit. Then I asked some friends what they thought of the artwork and also showed the one with no effect. Surprisingly enough, a lot of people preferred the blue one with no effect, but another art friend said that she thought the blue one is a bit too cold, so she advised that I add a little bit of warmth to it. So after doing some more finishing touches here and there, this is the final result. I hope you guys like it. Tell me which one you guys prefer, the blue or the pink. Anyways, this was a really nice study that really helped me level up my artwork. I'll see you guys next week with another video. Faye out. Bye!